Victimhood attracts predators. This is a concept that I've spoken about time and time again on this channel, but a lot of my critics, when they hear this, they get upset because they confuse this statement with me not being compassionate or me not acknowledging people's individual struggles. No, I get that people struggle, but it can't stop there. You have to push yourself to overcome and persevere, because if you don't, someone will use your weakness as an opportunity to sell you a solution that you may already have a solution for. And what problem is that exactly? Victimhood. Victimhood is the problem, and I called this once BLM reemerged last summer. This movement did nothing but create racial tensions with the purpose of keeping the population fixated on racism, and it worked. Seriously, you can't deny it. Everywhere you turn, someone's talking about systemic racism, critical race theory, implicit bias, white supremacy. It's honestly exhausting. So regardless if you supported the movement or you're actively working to defeat racism, we need to have an honest conversation about society's obsession with skin color and why it's in our best interests to stop doing it. So for today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a false narrative that's being pushed by leeching off of the racial tensions that were manifested last summer. But before we get started, I just want to thank Surfshark VPN for sponsoring today's video. Now more than ever, our internet reliance has been rapidly increasing. From streaming our favorite shows to keeping in touch with our loved ones, and even our banking is mostly done online these days. We'd like to think our information is safe, but as our online footprint increases, so does our need for proper security. Surfshark is a VPN service that I use that protects your information by encrypting all of the data you send through the internet, keeping unwanted people from seeing it. Another great reason to use a VPN is because content from streaming services can be restricted based on what country you're living in. With Surfshark, you can solve that problem by simply changing your location. Not only is this good for people that want to keep up with their favorite shows, but it's also a critical tool for those that live in countries that are heavily censored or monitored by their government. Click the link below and use my code Gothix for 83% off plus 3 extra months for free. Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to try it out for yourself. So if you try it and you don't like it, you can simply cancel your subscription and get your money back and go buy something else. All right, so back to the show. Jim Crow 2.0. I want you to listen to that. Jim Crow 2.0. What does that sound like? Does it sound like the KKK is outside my door? Does it sound like my family is about to get drenched by a fire hose? Does it mean I have to eat in a designated section for people that look like me or sit in the back of the bus? Does Jim Crow 2.0 mean that I don't have a right to vote? To me, Jim Crow 2.0 sounds less of racism and more of a manipulation tactic. Now, I pride myself in trying to be as objective as possible. However, this is something that I can't consciously ignore, and it needs to be addressed. Democratic politicians? I'm talking to you. Well, some of you. I don't like to generalize, but you know who you are. The 2020 presidential election was a pretty interesting one. Now, per YouTube's terms of service, I'm very limited to what I could discuss about this particular topic, but I will say that the event could be summarized as half the population believing the results were legitimate and the other half believing the results were, you know. And regardless of where you land on this particular topic, one thing rings true, and that was that mail-in voting was at an all-time high. Now, after that entire situation, we had all of these Democratic leaders opposing voter ID laws like SB 202 or SB 7, citing that they would be the equivalent to Jim Crow 2.0, and it would disproportionately keep Black, Latino, and Native American voters from casting their ballots. Oh, also, it was ableist as well. It's interesting because I don't recall this much objection over voter IDs prior to Obama going into office. In fact, when I was still mesmerized by identity politics, I didn't find much difficulty obtaining an ID and finding my way to the polling place. In fact, it was very easy, actually. The same can go for the previous year. I had no problems casting my vote, and I can't think of anyone else that did. So why are politicians claiming that voter ID laws are racist? I think it's racist in itself to assume that Black people can figure out how to obtain an ID and cast their vote. But you know what? For the sake of this argument, let's say that Black and brown people can't obtain an ID. Well, that would suggest that these same folks have never opened up a bank account, driven a car, purchased alcohol or cigarettes, received prescription medication, boarded a plane, applied for Medicaid, unemployment, Social Security, and welfare, to name a few. This also means that we're talking about an extremely small minority of citizens. So let's take it a step further and say, yes, there are some people that just don't know how to get an ID, or they don't have the resources to obtain one. Okay, that's a problem. Maybe they don't have a computer in order to find the information they need. Luckily for them, there are computers they can use at public libraries for free. Don't know how to use a computer? Thankfully, they also have people called library aides that are there to help. But you know what? Maybe they can't figure out how to get to the library. Maybe they just don't have a way to get there. They don't have a car, or maybe it's too far. Okay, fine. By that logic, that would mean that this individual does nothing. They don't move at all, and they stay in that exact same place day in and day out. Do they find ways to get groceries? Go to the doctors? Go to church? To see their family? Go on vacation? Then what's preventing them from getting to the library? We've got city buses, subways, rideshare, taxi, biking, asking friends or relatives, or my personal favorites, walking. And if they can use any of these methods for traveling to other places, why can't it be used for the library as well? But you know what? Maybe there aren't any libraries in town. Honestly, that's a damn shame. They're really great. But luckily, there are other resources available, like computer rental workstations at UPS, FedEx, or Staples. You can even check for programs at your local Salvation Army or Goodwill that can help you with this type of stuff. But perhaps this person does know how to get an ID, but they just don't have the money to get one. Okay, fair enough. Well, on average, government-issued IDs are around $30, but it depends on where you are. And thankfully, there are some states that have free options. Realistically, though, $30 isn't a lot of money. So perhaps there's something this person can cut back on in order to save up to obtain that ID. When I was in high school, I used to pocket my lunch money and go hungry in order to save up for new clothing at Hot Topic, because I considered my sense of style a priority. But if I needed to use that money in order to purchase an ID, I would have done that instead. But maybe this person doesn't have any money. Like, they are completely broke and they simply cannot afford a $30 ID and don't have any expenses they can temporarily forego. Okay, that's unfortunate and I really feel for this person. But again, we're talking about an extremely small minority. So I would suggest to these folks in particular to inform themselves on important voting dates in their city so they're prepared. For example, most people know that the presidential election is every 4 years. So in that situation, this individual has 4 years to save up for $30 in order to obtain an ID to vote. And if they're incapable of saving up $30 in 4 years, then I question why this person is voting in the first place. I'm serious. If someone can't figure out how to operate a computer, let alone figure out how to obtain an ID, then how can we be sure that this individual can figure out how to properly research in order to vote for the best candidate? I know this is a very insulting question to hear, but logically, make it make sense. I would put electing the leader of the free world at a higher priority than getting a government ID. This would mean that voting should be taken more seriously than getting an ID. And if someone can't get an ID, then I would argue they're not ready to vote in an election. Period. I've had an ID since I was 15, and not having one would have made my life significantly more complicated to navigate. If there's a will, there's a way, and we should be encouraging people to hold themselves responsible instead of making excuses for them. Because it's these excuses that are used to justify unnecessary legislation. And this is why I wanted to challenge some of the most common excuses surrounding this topic on camera, so you can understand that we're talking about a very small minority of people, okay? Someone that isn't capable of researching how to obtain an ID, someone that isn't capable of figuring out how to get there to get the ID, and someone that doesn't have the money to obtain an ID. That's a very small minority of people. So now we're able to see that the amount of effort being used to condemn voter IDs is actually disproportionate to how many citizens actually fall into that category. So the question is, why? If you think back to what I said earlier in this conversation, based on what happened last fall, most people could conclude that not requiring IDs would be an easy way to, But hold up, there's still the matter of Jim Crow 2.0. After all, SB 7 is a racist bill, right? Well, luckily for you, I have the bill right here, and I actually read through all of it, and I can't find a single thing that I could link this to racism. But perhaps I missed something, so let's see what TexasDemocrats.org has to say about the bill. Voter rights advocates outraged as racist to ableist voter suppression bill advances through Texas Senate. SB 7 has been widely condemned as the latest in Texas Republicans' voter suppression efforts. The bill includes extremist provisions that would make it harder to vote by mail, reduce early voting options, and require voters with disabilities to show a doctor's note before receiving a mail-in ballot. Moves that would add, oh God, okay, we're gonna skip all that. All right, this would basically put black and brown voters, okay, whatever. Okay, so they're saying that this bill would reduce early voting options. Not sure how that's racist, but all right. Luckily, most people should know the voting dates months in advance to be able to ask their boss for time off or make proper arrangements for that to happen. Sorry, but there is no excuse for not having the time to go vote. If voting is important to you, you'll make the time and you'll figure it out. Next up, requiring voters with disabilities to show a doctor's note to receive a mail-in ballot. Yeah, absolutely. As we just discussed, you should know months in advance about the voting dates, and if you forgot, that's unfortunate. Also, if you're on disability, you have to already go to the doctor, so getting a note shouldn't be a big deal. The reality is, mail-in voting was at an all-time high, and I'm sure you all remembered what problems followed as a result. Oh, sorry, was I not? Mail-in voting, to put it bluntly, would make it easier for someone to cheat if they wanted to do that. This isn't me suggesting anything, YouTube moderators. I'm just saying this cannot logically be ruled out as a possibility, and no sensible critical thinker can deny that. And for anyone that finds that possibility to be a good thing, I want you to really consider if trusting someone who cheats, lies, and has no regard for the Constitution would be someone that you would put your trust in. Again, not accusing anyone of anything, but just something to think about. Because those types of folks don't have any allegiance to their country, so I doubt they'd have allegiance to you. Just look at Cuba right now. And no, I didn't forget about SB 202. I read through that as well, and again, can't find anything moderately close to racist. I've seen some articles that suggest the bill would target black and disabled folks by making it a misdemeanor for people to hand out money or gifts, you know, coercion, including but not limited to food or drink to anyone standing in line to vote, because lines for voting are drastically long and this would put some voters at a disadvantage. Okay, well, I don't know if Democratic politicians realize this, but there's this thing. It's really, really great technology. It's called a water bottle. Right? They come in all various shapes and sizes, and some are insulated, so you never have to worry about someone bringing you water because you can bring some for yourself. And would you believe it? They even have this thing called a lunchbox, so you don't have to starve to death while waiting in line. Seriously, by this logic, this small minority of voters have never waited in line for a concert, a new pair of Jordans, or a Black Friday deal. Why are people excusing mediocrity instead of encouraging perseverance? Is it inconvenient to get an ID? Sure, I can admit that. But unfortunately, nothing that's worth achieving in life is easy, and I think condemning voter ID laws would not only leave the door open for potential fraud, I think it also sets a bad precedence by suggesting the bar should be lowered instead of pushing people to overcome their adversity. If you don't have adversity, it makes you comfortable. If some things are just handed to you with little to no work, you'll never learn how to overcome life's obstacles. And I think the truly racist thing about this entire topic is not holding black and brown citizens to the same standards by creating excuses for them. So going back to what I said about BLM at the beginning of this video, the main consequence of this movement was that it conditioned people into not taking responsibility for themselves. And I'm bringing this up because it's very important for people to understand how this narrative of victimhood is being used for personal or political gain. With BLM, there was too much complaining about officers and less time focusing on the root cause of those interactions, like why the suspect was breaking the law in the first place. This shouldn't upset you because what I'm saying is no different from what a responsible parent would teach their child. I don't care what the reasons were for breaking the law. Everyone has choices, and by overlooking those choices, it will keep people in a perpetual state of victimhood. You really want to help someone? Hold a mirror up to their face and make them take ownership for the choices they make in life. And if you want someone to be dependent on others, continue blaming all of their shortcomings on someone else. Voter ID laws are not racist, so don't be fooled, America. Use common sense and don't be afraid to ask questions. If something doesn't sound right, it probably isn't. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and don't forget to join me on Locals with other problematic people. My name is Gothix and I will see you in the next one. Bye!